Let me get to the meat of my discussion, which is the GST issues, because I'm on the council. So, as you may have read, I'm a pretty strident critic of many aspects of the GST, or at least I used to be more strident before I came to the council. Now I have to be a bit self-constrained, not to alienate my fellow members. But I hope it's a sign of how well I've integrated in the system that yesterday the Honorable Union Finance Minister has announced that at my request on behalf of the Chief Minister that the next GST Council will be held in Madurai in about a month from now. So clearly, at least I'm winning some friends, if not making a bigger difference than that. The reason I was a strident critic, and in some sense I still have profound issues with it, the notion of one nation, one tax is in itself kind of simplistic, right? I'm part of a group of ministers on casinos, horse racing, and online gaming. Now, online gaming, I understand that we need to have a national policy of taxation, of regulation, etc. But as you may know, horse racing, lotteries, casinos and all are state-regulated subjects under the Constitution. All those subjects are not pan-India policy. Goa has casinos. Madras has a race course. Ooty has a race course. Some states don't have any. West Bengal has lotteries. We ban the lottery. So it's a statewide subject. The notion that you should have a pan-India tax on these kinds of activities is profoundly flawed, as we're finding out every day in operation. We go through this whole GOM, we come up with a set of recommendations, we all make compromises, we submit the report, and then the minister from Goa goes off on a tirade saying this will kill my industry, it will kill tourism, it will do this, that and the other. So then the members of the council suggest, well, we'll tax horse racing and online gaming one way and then we'll let casinos go another way for the sake of surviving Goa's industry. So that makes no sense whatsoever. If the idea of doing these in a reasonable way, as many have pointed out here, is to keep it in the light, make sure it happens in a cognizable way that the government gets revenue as opposed to in the black market or the grey market, then surely the industry that's least at risk is casinos, right? Not online gaming, not horse racing. Because I cannot create a fake casino or a black market casino without anybody knowing. But I can do horse racing, off-track betting as long as the horse race is on the TV screen. I can do online gaming with Bitcoin, with something else, set it up in Singapore or with a VPN. So if you're going to give anybody any concession against driving into the black market, the last person you should think of is casino. So it went back and forth, and now we're going to go back to the GOM and do another assessment and all that. Raises the profound question, why should there be a national tax policy on casinos? By their definition, casinos are local. I can't, unless I'm like crazy, I don't go and construct a casino that's half in one state and half in another state. Right? Horse tracks are staying within one state. I'm not running a horse track between Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So this notion of one nation, one tax, I think has been taken too broad. It should have only applied to those kinds of goods that were primarily interstate transport goods and services or international transport goods and services. We have examples of exemptions already, right? Most of the sin products, alcohol and all that are taxed by the state, not by the union. Even petrol and diesel are taxed under the VAT regime. Excise continues, but VAT regime. So GST has some profound flaws. I think it was overarching in its ambition. It was rushed to execution with relatively little thought, and now we are finding all kinds of problems in the implementation. Now somebody pointed out this anomalies in the rate and the way they affect us, right? So yesterday, for example, in the council, we fought back and removed this move to make job work relating to tailoring services and utensils and pharma and agarbatti and all that go from 12 to 18%. He says crazy. I mean, who can track these things and why should I push them into the dark? So, if it's already happened for wet grinders, I'm sorry about that. We'll certainly take it up, or pumps. But I'm saying the job work. Now, what happens in these GST councils? Let's be practical. We meet for 2 days. We have an agenda about 15 items. One of those items will be the recommendations of the Fitment Committee, which is a bunch of IAS officers who have been meeting for days before and gone through some logic. And then they'll come back and give us a set of, 100 products and services on which there will be some change in rate requested. And those 100 will be taken up in the space of something like 1 hour in a 2-day meeting, or maybe 2 hours, right? Unless there are items where there's a passionate or vociferous kind of advocate one way or the other way, the practical constraint is that we cannot go through every single one of these in full detail, even though the Constitution envisages that publicly elected officials will be the ones making these decisions and not IAS officers. In practicality, that doesn't happen. It's just mechanically not possible. GST Council is supposed to meet once every 3 months. The last time it met was 9 months ago, except for one emergency meeting for the one agenda item on December 31st. The actual GST Council happened in September in Lucknow, and then is happening end of June in Chandigarh. So in execution, there are a lot of problems. Let me go to the specifics that you talked about and explain. I'm not sure that will satisfy you, but for example, the diamonds. We certainly didn't ask for any of it, but the diamonds, apparently the request to go from 0.25 to 1.5 came from the industry because of an inversion in duty structure and inability to get refunds or something. At the meeting, the state of Gujarat and others, said the equivalent of affidavits that the industry likes this and wants it, and therefore it was approved. Now if you say that's going to affect my business, we don't have infinite feedback loops for us to get information from everybody every day to go back. So the system of concentrating all these decisions in one place and then trying to run or optimize a country of the scale and diversity of India is an inherently flawed system. Let's look at instrument clusters. There was no conscious discussion. When the Fitment Committee report came up, there were, as I say, hundreds of items in this agenda item. Hundreds of specific components, parts, goods, services in this one agenda item of should the Fitment Committee's recommendations be accepted or not. Maybe out of those hundreds, there were 6 or 7 that we had got direct representation from, or other states had, actually, for example, they wanted to cut down the goods and services that local bodies could continue to get exemption on GST. And they wanted to restrict it from the 29 and 15 or something that's in the schedule of the Constitution down to about 6. So I, among others, argued against that, and that got knocked off. But otherwise, of the hundreds of things, maybe 4 or 5 got changed. The rest of them were voted on in toto, meaning either they all go or they all don't, and they all went. Because for the most part, either the Fitment Committee or the GST rationalization group of ministers said, we are doing this for rate inversion removal, or we are doing this at the request of the industry, therefore it should just be taken. I don't have the time or the ability to second guess the work done by others over months. So part of this, all I can tell you is the process is a very kind of inefficient and many times unintended consequences come kind of process. So what you need to do is make sure that you're continuously in touch with the Commercial Taxes Department, with the collector, with my office, because I'm the GST Council member. We are greatly staffing up and expanding our GST work. As you may know, being a critic is one thing. Doing something about it is something else altogether. So what I've done, instead of just being a critic, I've announced in the Assembly, we're going to set up a committee to look at fiscal federal relations broadly, but mostly GST, headed by eminent lawyer Arvind Dattar. We put the committee in place. We're getting IRS officer from the GST system as on deputation. She's going to join very shortly. We have set up some support systems for them. We're going to give them some specialists, some interns, some auditors, some lawyers. And we are going to start doing the work that the GST Secretariat in Delhi otherwise ought to do, to start looking at profound issues and how we can improve the process, somebody has to do it, we will, right? So, this is a very complex issue. Some of these things are easy to fix. We will certainly put in a representation and demand that the GST helpline must be in English and other regional languages, not just Hindi. I'll take that up immediately. I'll write a letter next week. To be fair, when we write these, they take them with some seriousness. If it's easy enough to implement, they do it as well. And I'll take it up with GSTN as well. In terms of the administrative tribunals, it came up for discussion yesterday, and we were presented with kind of a fait accompli that the model of the Central Administrative Tribunal for GST 80 should be this way because this court judgment says that and that court judgment says this and all that. And we were asked to kind of sign off on setting it up on that model. And I objected, many people objected, but I started the objections by saying this is such an important issue that it makes no sense that we take some judgment and some other judgment and put it across some template and then go from there. So this requires a profound rethink, and therefore please constitute a separate group of ministers that will go into the design, come up with what should be it's one thing to write it into the law 5 years ago. It's not been implemented for 5 years. Now, why should I rush to do it in 2 weeks if it's not been implemented already in 5 years? I'm going to start from scratch, say, should there be only one central GST tribunal, or should there be every state have an administrative tribunal, just like an appellate tribunal, just like a VAT regime, as somebody raised here. So, we are all for having GST state appellate tribunals with state High Court selected judicial members, state technical specialists like we have in the VAT, and after this they can go to some central GST 80. So if you don't get the design right first, if you allow this kind of, let's show that we're doing something kind of activity, it will come back to haunt us for years to come. Many of these decisions have been taken that way. So at least we got now a group of ministers who is going to work on this. Surely we will all have the input, and I can guarantee you that we will not allow for this kind of piecemeal or ad hoc. You see, the lines between the judiciary and the executive are getting blurred all the time. As I understand in the Constitution, legislators who are elected by the people get to create the law, get to make the constitutional amendment, get to pass a bill. Those who think that they are not fair or not in compliance with the Constitution can go and approach the courts. We cannot be designing an entire process, an administrative process, based on a court order that says you shall have these many members, this shall be the selection committee, that shall be the compensation, that shall be the removal. This is not in the realm of the judiciary. It is an administrative function that needs to be done by elected representatives in the administration of a government. So, we will get that right, I hope, but we are certainly going to make a much better attempt at it than the proposal that was presented yesterday. So hopefully we'll fix that problem as well. In terms of other things on the GST, yes, there is an inflationary trend. Again, this is a profound philosophical difference, right? I have said in many forums, I say it here again, the recommended guideline for the ratio of direct taxes to indirect taxes in the revenue of any government is 60-40, because by their very nature, direct taxes are progressive or can be progressive. I know who I'm taking it from, I know how much money you make, I can increase the rate at which you pay as you get better off. That's true for income taxes, that's true for corporate taxes, that's true almost all over the world. Indirect taxes, particularly point of sale taxes like GST, are inherently regressive. I don't know who's buying how much petrol, I don't know who's buying how much food, and if I tax those at higher rates, I can guarantee that poorer people spend more of their income on food, on petrol, on services that are taxable than rich people who otherwise invested, buy real estate, put in capital, projects, stuff like that. So the ratio recommended is 60-40, 60% direct, progressive, and 40% indirect, which is inherently regressive, but obviously comes off a much bigger base. In fact, we were not that badly off. We were about 55-45 or 57-43 in 2014. In the last 8 years, we have gone almost exactly the opposite way. We are about 57-56% indirect, over-reliance on GST. Therefore, the need to do inflationary rate rationalizations. So this is a big problem because the states have some input into the rate of GST, but we have zero input into the rate of income tax. We don't get to decide who gets what exemption. No other country in the world has an income tax exemption limit that is 3x, 2x, 5x the per capita income. Every other country in the world, I'm not saying what the rate of tax is, but for you to have to file a tax return and show at least pay some 2 rupees, 10 rupees, whatever, that cutoff of exemption to filing is usually some small percentage, 20, 30, 40, 50% of per capita income. In our country, it's 200 or 300%. Then how are we expecting to get proper compliance? How are we expecting to keep a proper ratio? So these are not issues that are easily fixable at the kind of last mile on what should be the discussion in the GST Council, whether the rate is A or B. The union government sets its target based on its philosophy of what kind of taxation it wants to do. We don't get control over many of those levers. And then we have to work within the framework of that and try to get the best outcome for our people. So I just want to leave you with realistic expectations. It's not that we are able to do chisel level selection and kind of optimizing of GST rates. The process and the system doesn't allow for that. There's only the hammer approach. And the hammer approach, as you know, very often results in not so great outcomes. But I don't want to kind of end on a bad note. I'm just being realistic to tell you what are the limitations, what are the capabilities, what are the kind of avenues. I will say that there are some good things I've noticed even in the last year that I've been in the GST Council, that the trend towards a more harmonious, towards getting the inputs of all states, towards waiting for consensus is generally in the right direction. Of course, we haven't heard anything about compensation yet. We keep talking, nothing happens. So I'm not sure the substance has changed, but the trend, at least in the approach, the philosophy has changed and is functioning a bit more federally. Maybe the recent Supreme Court judgment in the Gujarat shipment case had something to do with it, because all it did was reiterate what most constitutional scholars would have said, that the constitutional authority of a legislative body to raise taxes and set rates like a parliament or a state assembly cannot be overridden by the recommendatory conclusions of a statutory body like the GST Council. So again, there's a fundamental flaw in the design of GST where after all of us reach consensus, all we can do is send a recommendatory letter, and someday should some state decide to go, no, I'll go a different rate, the law allows them to do that. So it is a system that has got some profound structural limitations, but at least we are moving towards better operation, better functioning, more kind of camaraderie, better federalism. I hope that will continue. I'll certainly take up the specific issues in these and other representations. We need to improve the kind of, what can I say, selection of topics, assignment of responsibilities process quite a bit. But I think I've made my point enough times. Let me say again on the upside, for the first time after reiterating the request multiple times, this GST Council, for the first time, the meeting notice came 13 days before the meeting. Otherwise, it usually came 5 days or 3 days or 2 days before the meeting. So, we hear you. I will stick to my department. I think you can't get a better resource than the Honorable Chief Minister himself, who has come and spent 3 hours with you, taken all your requests. He's a very outcome-oriented and action-oriented gentleman, as you know. He drives us every day towards that. So you should have the reassurance that whatever you raised with him, if they're not already acted upon, are certainly within the pipeline. What is within my department or my departments or with the MSME, I'll certainly work on, partly because of my role, partly because I'm chairing the SLBCs these days, partly because of the GST Council. And certainly on the GST front, please direct all your requests, either through the Commercial Tax Department or through the collector to me. We'll take a much more quantitative, technical approach. We are building a big kind of think tank equivalent, and we hope to lead with ideas the improvement of the system in the country. So I'm sorry if I haven't specifically responded to some people's concerns, but I'm happy to take your written submissions, work on them. I apologize again for being a bit late due to factors beyond my control. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for patiently listening to me. And I wish you all a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the extensive update on the GST. We do understand it's an enormous task, and we are very, very happy a person of your caliber is representing us, and especially the challenges that we are all facing. And we wish you all the best as you continue to represent the challenges going forward. Now we'll open the floor for a few questions. We have 10 minutes, and if you can just restrict again the question to 2 minutes or your concerns, we would really appreciate it. Please stand from where you are or raise your hand. We'll pass over the mic.
Vanakkam, sir. Very good evening to you. My name is Sudhakar. I'm from Turbo Engineers. I'm also past chairman for CII MSME. In fact, under CM's able leadership, the state is performing extremely well. And I'm sure that you are also rocking in your portfolio. Your voice is very, very strong, a metallic voice which reaches everywhere and makes vibrant. I'm really congratulating you this one. Sir, as far as MSME is concerned, definitely you have a concern, you are doing very well. But I have only one important request for you. This is in stress for the last couple of years because of COVID. 1, 2, subsequently the raw material prices. During Kalanjar's regime, we used to have a price preference classes. Nowadays, it is not being there, sir. We have been requesting the government to introduce, because Tamil Nadu government is the biggest procurement agency in this state. So we need this SOP to MSME, which will be the great help for MSMEs to survive and sustain, sir. A price preference class. Because so the corporate, their procurement price is different, whereas MSME's procurement difference. The financial cost is different, MSME financial cost is different, sir. This we need from the government, from under your leadership, sir, please. Thank you so much.
Good evening, sir. I'm Mithun Ramdas once again. Sir, you had mentioned to us clearly the challenges that you face in the GST Council while approving the various tax revisions. But there are some genuine, while the IAS officers look at only the government revenue numbers, there are some cases where the farmer and the end consumer is really impacted, and thereby the industry being impacted. The GST increase in pumps being a classic example. Is there any way for us to take it up such that it reaches the council and where it can be reversed?
Yeah, there's always room. In fact, in this Fitment Committee report, there was already recommendations to increase the GST on certain types of cattle feed, leaving out those for cows, but taking up those that were used by other kind of livestock and all that. We pushed that back. So the thing is, it's all about timing. Meaning, if you see it coming, for example, I'll just give you another example. There was a move about 9 months ago in the Lucknow Council to increase the GST on coconut oil alone, not all edible oils, but coconut oil alone, and say that coconut oil, irrespective of the size of the container, should be considered cosmetic and not edible, and therefore should be taxed at 18%, and all the other oils would continue to have this distinction of which was edible, which was not, despite the fact that the coconut oil containers had FSSAI approval as edible products. Somebody got to me enough time before the meeting, and therefore we were able to aggressively counter it, and we said this is completely unfair. Tamil Nadu is a big producer of coconut oil. The southern states are the major impacted. It is atrocious that you do it only for, either you say all oil above a certain size is considered edible, below is cosmetic, or you say none. And we were able to beat that back. And that was a lobbied, in my understanding, lobbied effort brought through the fitment committee of IAS officers. But we got to know ahead of time and we beat it back. So if there are issues like this, certainly we can put in a request. Fitment committee works continuously. But timing is very important. If we don't get to hear from you ahead of time, then we have to do kind of clawback work after it's already done. If we get to hear ahead of time, we can stop it before it comes into effect. Or we can try. I'm not sure we can. But the council is a reasonable place. If you can give reasonable arguments and reasonable logic, and I pointed out, I won't say to whom, but in one discussion, it was said, no, the fitment committee thinks so. I said, but the fitment committee is not like the constitutional authority. And the difference between the fitment committee and us is not that you have greater time, you can do greater technical analysis, is that you're not accountable to anybody. We have to go and stand for election every 5 years. So we come from the people, we'll get to decide what risk we're going to take or what cost we're going to take. So timing is important. We'll take this up certainly, but if any of you, I give that as general advice. Usually these things are spread in the media anyway and they've been taken up for discussion or they've been tried before and beaten back. If you're aware that such things are happening, please bring them to our notice. We'll also do the same. We have a seat on the fitment committee. When we are communicated things, like for example the rate rationalization committee, we wrote back extensive, like a 30-page document. We said all these we agree, all these we object, the rest we reserve our opinion. If it comes to discussion, we'll take it up at that time. And generally, if we are clear in our logic and we object, we're able to get our way.
Good evening, sir. The transition from central excise VAT to GST regime, there was a Sabka Vishwas scheme which came for the central excise duty. Likewise, now VAT Samadhan schemes are coming in the neighboring states. So it would be very, will be obliged.
Yeah, we have announced a VAT Samadhan scheme in the assembly. The file actually came to me. It had not been discussed extensively enough. It made no distinction based on the timing. It was a very inadequately, in my consideration, thought through plan. So I've sent it back for review. It's already, by the time it reaches my desk, I'm the second last signatory, then the Chief Minister. So it's well in progress, but the scheme was not, in my opinion, adequately thought through and designed. So I've sent it back. In the next 2-3 weeks, we'll get it done and we'll come out. Yeah.
The last point is about the tribunal. Even my Vice President said that there should be an area bench for the tribunal. And when you were mentioning, sir, that you were saying that it is in process. The only issue is no tax law would be complete without a resolution mechanism. And the only resolution mechanism is the first, because after an adjudication and a first appeal before the department, where it is kind of always biased, the first proper judiciary is the GST tribunal, which we had seen in Sestat in central excise. Now, this being delayed for over 5 years now, and an interest of 18%.
Sir, I can't control what has already happened in the past. I'm telling you that I'm telling you 2 or 3 things. I'm telling you we will get the tribunal done. There will be state appellate tribunals rather than central only. We will try and get multiple benches in the state because it's up to the GOM to decide. Considering I was relatively strident in my argument, I suspect that the Honorable Union Finance Minister will throw me into the GOM, though they have not named the people. So we will do it properly. We'll get the tribunals in place. I can't answer for things that happened outside of my control. I was not a minister till a year ago. The GST regime was not introduced by my government or my party.
The only point I wanted to make is 18% interest is accumulating for all the litigation. So in 5 years it will double the litigation, the demand will double. So it may be taken. And Mr. Arvind Dattar, the senior with whom I am also reactively engaged, is the crusader who went to the Madras High Court and quashed the provisions of the GST tribunal in the flawed law, I would say, towing your words. So he can also be brought in because he had
he's already permanently, he's the chief of my advisory committee for the state of Tamil Nadu. So he's giving us inputs every day. I don't need to bring him in for any one thing, right? Every day.
Thank you.